Till Wallace was an enterprising young man who traveled to Alaska because he thought he could make enough money on the last frontier to get him to Australia in order to pursue a girl that he found interesting. Shortly after he mustered out of the Army in 1955, he flew to Alaska to meet up with Brother Art. He hitchhiked from Anchorage to Moosehorn Trading Post in search of his brother. He knew he was hot on the trail when he walked past a stack of handmade concrete blocks that were made exactly like they had made them back home in New York. Jim McDowell, who owned and ran Moosehorn Lodge, helped him connect with Art, and before long the two brothers had settled into a small business making concrete blocks for area settlers. Jim McDowell was their first customer, ordering 4,000 blocks for his business expansion and paying them 19 cents per block. These blocks were made from sand and gravel out of the Knik River bed, which was hand-screened, hand-mixed, and then poured into a block mold. When each block came out of the mold, it had to set for 4 days, be watered each of those days, and then allowed to cure. Needless to say, it was a business run on a shoestring budget and entailed a lot of sweat and creativity. Till became known that first summer as Nature Boy, since he was rarely seen in anything other than swim trunks. It is not clear whether he went barefoot by choice or because he couldn't afford a pair of shoes. The brothers hit it off well with the McDowells and their neighbors, the Hughesbys. Since the Wallace boys got along well with both families, Till swears that the Hughesbys sold them the half-acre of land between Moosehorn and themselves just to have a buffer between those two sparring families. Art and Till continued to make and sell blocks for a couple of years until Art got a job at the Eklutna power plant. Till kept working the concrete block business, with brother Mike arriving to help in 1958, and eventually their little business had evolved from hand-screening gravel off the Knik River into a full-fledged concrete and gravel business. After the 1964 earthquake, Till was able to acquire a quake-damaged batch plant from a Lagco in Anchorage and move it out to his business site just north of Moosehorn, and Klondike Concrete was born. Now you would think that hauling, hand-screening, and mixing gravel all day would be cause for a young fellow to sleep well at night, even in the land of the midnight sun, and I'm sure that was true until 3 young Swiss girls rode their bikes through town in August of 1959. Till picked up on the clues that marked them not only as out-of-towners, but foreigners as well. When he approached them and asked if they were foreigners, they replied, "Oh no, we're not farmers." And so, with that little misunderstanding serving as an icebreaker, Till and the ladies began a long friendship. As it turned out, Till's future bride, Ella Heats, and her 2 girlfriends, Ruth and Sonia, had been lured to Alaska by slides that Yule Kilcher of Homer had returned to Switzerland with. He was trying to promote interest in Alaska among the young folks in school there. In this case he succeeded, and the girls eventually made their way from Switzerland to Vancouver, Canada, and finally up the Alcan on 3-speed bikes to see Alaska. At any rate, as they passed through Chugiak, Till struck up a friendship with the girls that day and convinced them to put the bikes in his truck and ride with him to Anchorage. They had to leave the bikes at a lot in Anchorage while Till picked up a load of cement with his truck. When they came back for the bikes, they found the gate to the fence lot locked and everyone gone for the weekend. Till let the girls stay in his cabin and they helped him pour concrete over the weekend. When they got their bikes back, they headed to Seward and then ultimately to Homer. Till worked his concrete business all day and then drove along the Seward Highway in the evening until he found the yellow scarf that indicated where the girls were camped. However, there was a bit of a snag the first night, as the girls had thought surely he was joking when he suggested they put out a yellow scarf so he could find them. So they never put the scarf out near the road. Till drove all the way to Seward and back, checking pullouts and campgrounds along the way until he finally found them. He didn't get much sleep that night, but after that they always remembered to put the scarf out. He spent each night of their travel into Seward visiting around the campfire and sleeping there as well, then driving back to work in the morning. Although the girls eventually made their way to Homer, they were disappointed to find Yule not at home. They headed back to Seward, then decided it was time to head back to Vancouver and find jobs. Till followed the girls to Canada and finally convinced Ella to drive back to Alaska with him. Thus Ella returned to Alaska, where after nearly a year of pursuit she became Till's wife in March of 1960. They celebrated their 43rd anniversary this year. Upon her return to Alaska, Ella found work in a floral shop and has spent most of her years in Alaska working as a florist, the trade she learned in Switzerland. First at Burgoy's Floral in Anchorage, then at their Eagle River store. Her designs and creations have adorned homes, churches, businesses, and services throughout the community for nearly 50 years. She continued to work at the store in Eagle River when it became Flowers in Design. In the meantime, Till's parents, Bob and Jeanette Wallace, along with youngest brother Jimmy, had decided to investigate this new land that the three Wallace boys had made their home. They too fell in love with the rugged beauty of the land, and by 1959 had arrived in Chugiak to stay. In 1960, along with brother Mike, Till and Ella homesteaded 160 acres, 1½ miles above Skyline Drive in Eagle River. Their plan was to eventually subdivide the land and develop a scenic and pristine area for others to live in and enjoy. Local homeowners along Skyline Drive took exception to this idea and formed a homeowners association in order to block development plans. Much money was poured into court costs and efforts to comply with each new stumbling block that came their way, but ultimately they had no more heart or money to fight the homeowners and abandoned their subdivision plan. Till, determined to make something good come of the homestead on Wallace Brothers Mountain, a place he and his brother Mike dubbed the town of no place, decided they would develop a mountain getaway for folks to come and enjoy a rustic bit of wilderness. The entire family worked at development of a ranch where folks could come and ride the mountainsides on horseback, just kick back and enjoy the scenery and oftentimes the wildlife, enjoy a home-cooked ranch-style meal, or simply get away from their toils and troubles for a bit. Till refers to it as his offering of utopia to out-of-towners and locals alike. Although it wasn't easy getting the ranch up and running, as they lost 2 tents in the early weeks to bears and were burned out twice later on, they finally achieved a modicum of success and enjoyed hosting those who came. Of course, the ranch also provided a wonderful place to raise their 2 children, Stephanie and Jimmy, who not only learned how to work with and around animals as well as people, but learned a good work ethic as well. Both children remain nearby today. Stephanie and her husband Gary live in Palmer. Gary works for Klondike Concrete, and the 2 are busy raising Till and Ella's 3 grandchildren. Jimmy lives in Palmer and has followed in his father's footsteps, working in the concrete business in the valley. In spite of business and family obligations, Till and Ella have found time for volunteer work. Till was one of the early members of the newly formed Chugiak Volunteer Fire Department, the first president of the Chugiak-Eagle River Chamber of Commerce, and even found time for a chess club that included Richard Berg, Darrell Daly, Pete Dahlman, and Jim Polievko. He was in charge of the first community cleanup day in 1970. He still remembers that they hauled 36 pickup loads of trash on that day. Ella has donated extensive hours at the local senior center teaching floral design, and she teaches an exercise class there as well. Something that Till considers among his greatest achievements in the way of community service was using the ranch as a means of reaching out to troubled teens and providing a much-needed respite for many adults as well. He devoted time and effort in helping groups such as the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and Alpine Alternatives with donations of time and resources at the ranch. They also hosted numerous other youth groups, special events, and even weddings. Till, Ella, Mike, and the kids ran the ranch from 1987 to 1991. Now, you may be asking yourself, whatever happened to Till's notion of going to Australia? Well, obviously he got a little sidetracked in Alaska, but a year after his arrival here he did journey to Australia. In November of 1955 he ended up at Sydney University, where he studied for 1 year on the GI Bill. For the next year he traveled much of Europe, Asia, and the Mid-East, most of it by train or on the end of his thumb. He worked odd jobs along the way and enjoyed meeting people from all walks of life. While he was in Singapore he acquired a small monkey which cost him all of $3.30, and that was including the chain. He and the monkey were traveling companions till he returned to Alaska in June of '57. Other travels have included a 6-month trip to Europe for Till and Ella in 1964, where they bought a Volkswagen and toured Europe and North Africa. A later vacation in 1982 included their children, when they bought a motorhome and toured the United States. They returned some 15,000 miles later, having seen much of America. In 1995 and '96 he and Ella once again toured the USA in a motorhome, leaving home for 6 months. Till sold Klondike Concrete to Steve Siegel in 1990 and decided it was time to ease up a little. Ella continued to work at the floral shop, but suffered a stroke at work in 1993, which prompted her immediate retirement. Subsequent testing revealed 2 tumors in her brain. She underwent brain surgery in January, then again the following September. Her health remains good today, and she still works part-time at local flower shops, but she and Till lead a quieter, more relaxed life today, enjoying their hobbies, their pets, and their grandchildren.